Businessman abandons twins in the forest, but a cow sees them and does something amazing. Michael Thompson drove his imported car down the dirt road with a heart as heavy as lead. In the back seat, his 6-year-old twin daughters, Emma and Olivia, stared out the window, confused about why their father was so quiet on that Sunday morning. Then Michael pulled the car over to the side of the road and with tears in his eyes asked the girls to get out. "Daddy needs to take care of some things and will be right back," he lied, as he placed a small backpack on each of their shoulders. Before the little girls could protest, he quickly got back in the car and sped off, leaving behind only a cloud of dust, and 2 girls in simple dresses with frightened eyes, standing in the middle of a rural road cutting through the forest, near New Hope, deep in Pennsylvania. "Dad!" shouted Emma, the more talkative of the 2, running a few steps after the already distant car. "He'll come back, Em. He promised." Olivia tried to comfort her sister, pulling her hand to keep her from running further down the road. But her almond-shaped eyes were also brimming with tears. The sun was rising in the sky as the 2 stood still, holding hands, unsure of what to do. The sounds of the forest grew scarier by the minute. What would happen to them now? "Let's wait here, Liv. Daddy said he'd be right back in," Emma insisted, sitting down by the roadside. Olivia, always more cautious and practical than her sister, looked around. There were no houses in sight, just the dirt road and the dense forest surrounding it. Fear began to tighten her chest. What if he takes too long? "It's getting hot here, Em. Let's find some shade." The girls walked a few steps into the woods, just enough to reach a large tree that offered cool shade. They sat down and opened the backpack their father had left them. Inside they found only 2 small water bottles, a few packs of crackers, and 2 thin sweaters. "Why is Daddy taking so long?" Emma asked, after what felt like forever but had only been a few hours. What the little girls didn't know was that Michael Thompson wasn't coming back. Once a successful businessman, he had lost everything after a series of failed investments. Debts piled up. Creditors began threatening. Him and his life fell apart after the sudden loss of his wife, Jennifer, to a rare illness. Unable to care for his daughters and drowning in financial trouble, he made the desperate decision to leave them near their maternal grandparents' farm, convinced they'd be better off growing up away from him and his problems. What Michael hadn't realized was that in his despair, he had left the girls on the wrong side of the road. Their grandparents' farm was in the opposite direction, several miles away. Disoriented and scared, the twins wandered deeper into the woods, moving further from the destination their father had intended for them. As the afternoon wore on, the girls decided to walk further, hoping to find their way back. Every rustle in the leaves startled them. Every shadow seemed like a threat. "I'm scared, Em," Olivia admitted, squeezing her sister's hand tighter. "Me too," Emma replied, the first time she had acknowledged her fear. "But we're together. Mom always said we're stronger together, remember?" The sky was growing dark when the girls heard a noise among the trees. They froze in fear. The sound of snapping branches and trampled leaves grew louder. Suddenly, from the shadows emerged a massive cow with a brown coat and majestic horns. The animal stopped just a few feet away, gazing at them with large, calm eyes. "Don't move, Liv," Emma whispered, trembling. To the girls' surprise, the cow showed no sign of aggression. Instead, it approached slowly and stopped a few steps away, as if curious about who those little lost creatures in the forest were. Olivia, who had always had a special affinity with animals, was the first to relax. "He doesn't seem angry, Em, look." The ox, as if understanding it needed to prove its peaceful intentions, lowered its head and began grazing calmly near the girls. Strangely, its presence brought unexpected comfort. They were no longer alone in that vast green expanse. As night fell, exhausted from walking and crying so much, the twins ended up falling asleep under a large tree, hugging each other to ward off the growing chill. What they didn't realize was that the ox stayed nearby, like an unlikely guardian, lying down not far from them. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, the twins woke to the sound of lowing. The ox was just a few meters away, as if trying to wake them. The girls' stomachs growled with hunger, and their small stash of cookies was already gone. "I'm hungry, Em," Olivia murmured, rubbing her belly. "Me too. Let's look for something to eat." The girls got up, and to their surprise, the ox began walking slowly, stopping now and then, as if waiting for them to follow. "I think he wants us to go with him," Emma said, intrigued. "Really?" Olivia questioned. But with few other options, they decided to follow the animal. The ox led them to a small stream where they could drink fresh water and wash their faces. Then it continued guiding them through the forest until they reached a small clearing with fruit trees. "Look, Liv, guavas!" Emma exclaimed, pointing to a tree laden with ripe fruit. The ox's presence seemed to keep other wild animals at bay, giving the girls a sense of security they wouldn't have had alone. As they picked and ate the fruit, the twins began naming their new friend. "Let's call him Guardian," Olivia suggested, always fond of grand names. "I think Spotty suits him." "Better," Emma disagreed, noting the white patches on the animal's brown coat. They debated for a few minutes before settling on a compromise. The ox would be called Brave because, as Emma said, he's not afraid of the forest, just like the brave knight in the story Mom used to tell. What neither of them knew was that Brave wasn't a wild animal, but a tame ox that had escaped from Happy Haven Farm, owned by Mrs. Margaret Wilson, a 73-year-old woman known in the area for her kindness and cultivation of medicinal herbs. The animal often wandered freely, always returning at dusk for feed and shelter. That same day in the town of New Hope, Michael Thompson couldn't sleep, eat, or work. Remorse consumed him like a voracious cancer. Sitting at the desk in his small hotel room, he stared at the photo of his daughters, trying to convince himself he'd made the right choice. "They'll be better off without me," he repeated like a mantra, tears streaming down his face, marked by deep, dark circles. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Robert, his accountant and only friend, who'd stayed by his side during the financial collapse. "Michael, I need to talk to you urgently. There was a mistake in the calculations. The situation isn't as dire as we thought." "What do you mean?" Michael asked, his heart racing. "That investment you made last year, remember? It paid off. It won't cover all the debts, but it's enough to renegotiate with the creditors and start over." "Michael, you didn't have to—" Robert hesitated, knowing what his friend had done with his daughters. Michael hung up the phone, stunned. A miscalculation. A damn miscalculation had cost him the greatest treasure of his life. On impulse, he grabbed his car keys and rushed to the hotel parking lot. He needed to get his daughters back, to beg for forgiveness, even if he didn't deserve it. What he didn't know was that while he was desperately driving back to the rural road, his daughters were walking deeper into the forest, guided by Brave the ox, in the opposite direction of their maternal grandparents' farm. Mrs. Margaret was worried. Brave, her gentlest ox, hadn't returned the night before, something that had never happened before. Despite her age, she went out to look for him, leaning on her cane as she walked around her property, venturing into the forest where she usually gathered her medicinal herbs. "Brave? Brave, where are you, sweetheart?" she called with her tired but firm voice. Then she heard the unmistakable sound of her ox's lowing, followed by something that puzzled her: children's laughter. Mrs. Margaret followed the sounds, and when she reached a small clearing, she saw a surreal sight. Her ox lying calmly while two identical girls braided makeshift vines into his tail. "Good heavens!" the woman exclaimed, startling the girls, who quickly hid behind the animal. "Easy now, little ones, I won't hurt you." Mrs. Margaret approached slowly, noticing the girls' dirty, torn dresses, their faces streaked with dried tears, their tangled hair full of leaves and twigs. "How did you end up here, my little angels?" she asked gently, crouching as much as her knees allowed. The twins exchanged nervous glances, but something in the woman's kind face inspired trust. "Our dad said he'd come back," Emma finally answered. "But he's taking too long." "How long have you been in the forest?" "Since yesterday," Olivia replied, slowly stepping out from behind the ox. "But Brave's been taking care of us." Mrs. Margaret's heart ached. Who could abandon two small children in the middle of the forest, and how had her ox found and protected them all this time? "Is Brave your ox?" Emma asked, moving closer. "Yes, dear. He lives on my little farm, just nearby. The woman reached out to the girls. "Would you like to come with me? I have warm food, a bathroom where you can wash up and clean beds to rest in." The twins hesitated, looking at Brave as if asking for advice. The ox, as if understanding, took a step toward the woman as if approving the idea. "Will Brave come with us?" Olivia asked. "Of course, sweetheart. He lives there too." Emma still hesitated, glancing back at the forest. "But what if Daddy comes back and can't find us?" she asked, her voice trembling. The question broke Mrs. Margaret's heart. She crouched down, with difficulty to meet the girl's eyes. "Listen, my dear, here's what we'll do. We'll leave a little note right here on this tree. If your father comes back, he'll find it and know where you are. How does that sound?" Emma's eyes sparkled with hope. "Do you promise?" "I promise, my little angel." Mrs. Margaret took out a small notepad from the bag where she kept her gathered herbs and wrote a simple note. "The girls are safe at Happy Haven Farm, 2 kilometers from here, following the spring path. Mrs. Margaret Wilson." She pinned the E paper to a low branch where it would be clearly visible to anyone passing by. What she didn't tell the children was that she doubted anyone who would abandon their own daughters would come back for them. But she preferred to keep hope alive in the little ones' hearts. So, hand in hand with the kind woman, the twins made their way to Happy Haven Farm, with Brave walking calmly behind them like a faithful guardian. Mrs. Margaret Wilson's small property appeared after a bend in the road, revealing itself gradually like an unfolding painting. It was simple but overflowed with warmth in every detail. A 2-bedroom house, painted a light blue reminiscent of spring skies, with a wide porch that wrapped around the entire front. Ferns and colorful begonias hung from the porch ceiling, creating a true hanging garden. Red, white, and yellow roses grew in well-tended beds, lining the stone path to the entrance. The sweet scent of flowers, mingled with the smell of damp earth and aromatic herbs, growing in special plots near the kitchen. A massive century-old mango tree dominated the right side of the yard, offering generous shade on hot afternoons. The kitchen was spacious, with a wood-burning stove that kept the room cozy even on the coldest days. There, Mrs. Margaret prepared her teas and natural remedies, known and respected throughout the community. Wooden shelves displayed meticulously labeled glass jars with the names and properties of each herb. Out back stretched a diverse orchard with jabuticaba, guava, acerola, and orange trees. Beyond it, an impeccably organized vegetable garden provided the produce she consumed and shared with neighbors in need. A small wooden stable, painted the same color as the house, housed Brave and 2 gentle dairy cows named Blessing and Serenity. As soon as they arrived, the girls gazed in wonder at this little slice of paradise, so different from the frightening forest where they'd spent the night. Brave headed straight for the stable, as if recognizing his way home, astonishing the girls. "He already knows where he lives," Emma exclaimed. "Of course, my dear, Brave has been part of the family for many years," Mrs. Margaret explained with a smile. "Now, let's take care of you." She led the girls through the house, showing them the bedroom where they'd sleep, with 2 single beds covered in handmade patchwork quilts. "How pretty," Olivia said, running her little hand over the quilt's varied fabrics. "It looks like a rainbow." "I made it myself, sweetheart. Every scrap of fabric tells a story from my life." In the simple but spotless bathroom, Mrs. Margaret filled the tub with warm water and added some herbs that filled the air with a gentle scent of lavender and chamomile. "This will help you relax after so much adventure," she explained as she helped the girls undress. While the twins bathed, laughing and playing as if the traumas of recent days were beginning to fade, the woman rummaged through an old trunk in the guest room. From it, she pulled out some carefully folded children's clothes, stored away for decades. "These belong to my daughter, Catherine," she explained upon returning to the bathroom with the garments. "She would have loved to meet you." "Where is she?" Emma asked, ever curious. "She went to live with the angels many years ago, dear, just like your mother." The girls fell silent for a moment, processing the information. "Do you feel sad too?" Olivia finally asked, with wisdom beyond her years. "Every day, my dear, but with time we learn to keep people in our hearts, and the sadness grows gentler." After their refreshing bath, The girls put on the offered clothes, simple floral cotton, dresses that, though too big, were temporarily adjusted with strategic pins. Mrs. Margaret patiently combed through the tangled hair of the two girls, telling stories to distract them whenever she encountered particularly stubborn knots. In the cozy kitchen, she prepared a nourishing vegetable soup made with produce from her own garden, seasoned with fresh herbs that filled the house with an inviting aroma. As the girls sat at the solid wood table, she pulled a freshly baked sourdough loaf from the oven, its golden crust and irresistible scent making their eyes sparkle with joy. "I've never tasted bread this delicious," exclaimed Emma after her first bite, a ring of flour around her mouth. "Me neither," agreed Olivia, carefully blowing on her steaming soup. "You cook even better than Dorothy." "Who's Dorothy?" asked Mrs. Margaret, serving herself a modest portion of soup. "She was our cook before Dad said we couldn't have staff anymore," Olivia explained. "She made a really good chocolate cake, but your bread is better." The mention of their father cast a shadow over the girls' eyes again. Mrs. Margaret noticed the sudden change and quickly shifted the subject. "After dinner, who wants to meet the cows? They love visitors, especially children." "What are your names, my little angels?" she asked as the girls ate eagerly. "I'm Emma, but you can call me Em," replied the first. "And I'm Olivia, but they call me Liv," added the other. "What lovely names, and what's your father's name?" The girls exchanged glances, suddenly quiet. "Michael," Olivia finally murmured, "but he got really sad after Mom went to heaven." "And he said he had problems to solve," Emma added. "That's why he left us waiting." Mrs. Margaret felt her eyes well up. It was clear the girls had been abandoned, but they were still too innocent to fully grasp the situation. Or perhaps in their childlike wisdom, they understood more than they let on, and were just shielding themselves from the painful truth. "Well, while your father sorts out his problems, you can stay here with me. How does that sound?" The twins' faces lit up, and they both nodded enthusiastically. That night, for the first time since being left behind, the little girls slept peacefully in soft beds, their stomachs full and their hearts a little lighter. In the barn, Guardian also rested, as if his mission to protect them now included bringing them to this safe haven. Meanwhile, on the rural road, Michael Thompson drove frantically, stopping every person he met to ask if they'd seen twin girls. His desperate search led him to the farm of his late wife Jennifer's parents, where he hoped to find his daughters. Anxious, he knocked on the door of the grand farmhouse and was greeted by Richard Miller, his former father-in-law, a stern-faced man who had never hidden his disapproval of his son-in-law. "What are you doing here, Michael?" he asked coldly. "My daughters, I brought them. I left them near here yesterday. They didn't arrive." The farmer's expression shifted from disdain to genuine concern. "What are you talking about? We haven't seen the girls since last Christmas, when you still bothered to bring them to visit their grandparents." Michael felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. The girls hadn't made it. They were lost, alone, abandoned. The weight of his mistake crashed down on him like a mountain. "My God, what have I done?" he whispered, falling to his knees on the porch. The chirping of birds and the clucking of hens in the yard announced the arrival of a new day at Happy Haven Farm. Mrs. Margaret, accustomed to rising with the sun, was already in the kitchen preparing a hearty breakfast when she heard giggles coming from the girls' room. Upon gently opening the door, she found the twins sitting on one of the beds, their heads close together, whispering secrets to each other. The scene was so ordinary, so typical of childhood, that for a moment she almost forgot the traumatic circumstances that had brought them there. "Good morning, my flowers," she greeted cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" The girls turned quickly, their faces lighting up with smiles. "Yes, Grandma Margaret," replied Emma, using the affectionate title that had come naturally. "I dreamed I was flying on Guardian's back, and I dreamed about raindrop cookies," added Olivia, always the more practical of the two. "Will you make some for us?" Mrs. Margaret Wilson laughed heartily. "Let's make them together. How about that? But first we have to keep our promise to help with the milking." After a quick wash-up with the girls wearing clothes Mrs. Margaret had adjusted overnight while they slept, the trio headed to the barn. Guardian was the first to greet them, with a soft moo that sounded like a morning hello. "He's saying good morning to us," Emma exclaimed, running to hug the animal's neck. Mrs. Margaret led the girls to the low wooden stools placed beside the cows and sat on one to demonstrate. "Watch carefully how it's done," she instructed, positioning the bucket strategically under the cow's udder. "You hold like this, firm but gentle." Her wrinkled fingers wrapped around the cow's teats with a delicacy born from decades of practice. "Then you just pull downward, always in this rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2. A thin, steady stream of frothy milk hit the bottom of the bucket with a musical sound. The girls watched the process in fascination, so different from anything they'd known in their old city life. "Who wants to try first?" Mrs. Margaret asked after filling a quarter of the bucket. "Me!" Emma exclaimed, always the more adventurous of the two. Mrs. Margaret gave up her stool and guided the girl's delicate hands, helping her find the right position. "That's it, dear. Now pull firmly, but don't yank," she instructed patiently. Emma squeezed too hard, sending a powerful jet of milk that completely missed the bucket and splashed right onto her own face. The surprise of the warm liquid on her skin made her let out a little shriek, followed by contagious laughter when she saw the white mustache that had formed above her lips. "Look, Liv, I have a mustache just like Grandpa Richard," she exclaimed, mimicking the stern expression of the grandfather they rarely saw. Mrs. Margaret and Olivia burst into laughter too, the joyful sound startling a few chickens pecking nearby. Mrs. Margaret wiped Emma's face with a cloth she always carried in her apron pocket. "Let's try again, more gently this time," she suggested, repositioning the girl's hands. After a few failed attempts, Emma finally managed to direct a timid stream of milk into the bucket, celebrating as if she'd accomplished something extraordinary. "I did it! Look, Liv, I did it!" "My turn now," Olivia requested, having carefully observed all her sister's mistakes to avoid repeating them. Always more methodical, Olivia followed Mrs. Margaret's instructions precisely, succeeding on her second try to establish a steady milking rhythm that even impressed the experienced woman. "Look at that, we've got a natural-born milkmaid here," Mrs. Margaret praised. "Hands like a fairy, just like your mother." "Mom knew how to milk cows?" Olivia asked, surprised. "She sure did. When she was a girl before she went to study in the city, she spent summers here on the farm. She had a special way with animals, just like you two." The girls absorbed this new information about their mother with thoughtful expressions, as if rediscovering a piece of family history they hadn't known before. While Olivia continued her successful milking, Brave approached curiously, watching the process with his big brown eyes. On a playful impulse, the girl aimed a stream of milk at the bull's snout, and to everyone's surprise, he opened his mouth and caught the liquid mid-air, then licked his whiskers with apparent satisfaction. "He liked it!" Emma exclaimed, clapping her hands excitedly. "Would you look at that?" laughed Mrs. Margaret Wilson. "In all my years, I've never seen Brave do that before." "It's because he's our special friend," Olivia declared with the absolute conviction only children possess. "He saved us in the forest, so now we're family." After milking, the girls helped feed the animals, spreading fresh hay and filling the troughs with clean water. Interacting with the creatures seemed to have a therapeutic effect on them, restoring some of the childlike lightness that abandonment had threatened to steal. Back in the kitchen, as promised, Mrs. Margaret taught the twins how to make raindrop cakes. With the patience of someone who had raised children and grandchildren, she guided their small hands to measure the flour, crack the eggs without letting shells fall into the batter, and stir just right. Not too much, not too little. "The batter is like life, girls," she mused as she watched them work. "If you stir too much, it gets tough and heavy. If you don't stir enough, the ingredients won't mix properly. The secret is finding balance." The girls absorbed these little lessons with the seriousness of those receiving pearls of wisdom, taking in not just the recipe, but also the values Mrs. Margaret subtly imparted. The delicious smell of frying cakes even attracted Brave, who appeared at the kitchen window, his damp snout sniffing the air with interest. The twins burst into laughter at the animal's almost human expression of anticipation. "I think he wants some too," said Emma. "Bulls don't eat raindrop cakes, Em," Olivia corrected. "They eat grass and hay." "But Brave is special," Emma insisted. "He saved us in the forest, remember?" After breakfast, their bellies full of cakes dusted with cinnamon and sugar, the twins ran to the backyard, closely followed by Brave, who seemed to have fully embraced his role as the little one's guardian. Mrs. Margaret watched from the porch as she knitted small wool sweaters for her new guests, adapting an old pattern to fit the girls' slender frames. The scene unfolding in the yard was like something out of a painting. The morning sun lit up the grounds, creating an almost golden glow. The twins, in their simple, mended dresses adjusted by Mrs. Margaret, ran barefoot through the grass, picking wildflowers that grew in the corners of the property. The bull, ever patient, let the girls decorate his horns with the flowers, creating a colorful crown that turned him into a near-mythical figure. Then, with surprising gentleness for his size, he allowed them to climb onto his back for short rides around the yard, walking with extra care so they wouldn't fall. The children's crystal-clear laughter mingled with Brave's occasional lowing, as if he were actively joining in the fun. The scene was as unusual as it was heartwarming, a silent testament to how, even in the darkest moments, life finds ways to bloom again. The woman decided she needed to learn more about these children. If they had truly been abandoned, she would have to notify the authorities, but something troubled her. The girls were well cared for. Their clothes, though simple, were of good quality, and they spoke fondly of their father despite the abandonment. During breakfast, she showed the twins an album of old photographs, hoping to distract them while she gathered more information. That's when something extraordinary happened. Upon seeing a particular photo, the two girls pointed excitedly. "Look, Liv, she looks just like Mom!" exclaimed Emma. Mrs. Margaret Wilson looked at the photo the girls were pointing to. It was of her great-niece Jennifer, daughter of her niece Sarah, taken many years ago during one of the rare family visits. Jennifer had distanced herself from the family after marrying a city businessman, much to her traditionalist parents' dismay. "Do you know Jennifer?" the older woman asked, astonished. "She's our mother," Olivia replied matter-of-factly. "But she went to heaven when we were 4. Mrs. Margaret felt her heart skip a beat. These girls were her great-great-nieces, daughters of Jennifer, whom she had barely known but who shared her blood. A troubling suspicion began forming in her mind. "And where do you live, my little angels?" "We used to live in a big house in the city," Emma answered. "But then Daddy said we had to move because there were problems, so he brought us here." "What's your last name?" "Thompson," Olivia replied. "Emma and Olivia Wilson Thompson." Wilson, the same last name as Mrs. Margaret. There was no longer any doubt. These girls were family, and something very serious must have happened for their father to abandon them like that. The news about twin girls found in the forest, protected by an ox, spread quickly through the small rural community of New Hope. It didn't take long for it to reach the ears of Sarah Miller, the girl's maternal aunt and daughter of Richard, who had seen Robert the day before desperately searching for his daughters. Sarah had never approved of her sister Jennifer's marriage to Robert, considering him a self-serving opportunist. After her sister's untimely passing, she kept her distance from her nieces, too hurt to face the faces that so reminded her of Jennifer. But now, something more than family ties motivated her sudden interest in the twins. After Jennifer's death, Robert had put the mansion they lived in up for sale to pay off debts, moving with the girls to a smaller apartment. What no one in the family knew, not even Robert at first, was that Jennifer had inherited a small rural property adjacent to her father's farm from a great-aunt. A property that, according to recent discoveries, housed one of the purest mineral water springs in the region, a hidden treasure that could be worth a fortune. The property was in the twins' names, with Robert as legal guardian until they came of age. Sarah had recently uncovered this fact and saw the perfect opportunity when she heard of her niece's disappearance. If she could gain custody of the girls, she could control the property and the lucrative spring. Determined, Sarah drove to Happy Haven Farm. Upon arriving, she found a scene she considered, at the very least, peculiar. 2 identical girls perched on the back of a docile ox, being watched by an elderly woman knitting on the porch. "Aunt Margaret?" Sarah called, stepping out of the car. Mrs. Margaret looked up from her knitting, immediately recognizing the niece she hadn't seen in years. "Sarah, what brings you here?" "I heard you found 2 lost girls in the forest." Sarah forced a paidaisus smile, walking toward the porch. "They're my nieces, my sister Jennifer's daughters, the twins. Hearing the unfamiliar voice, quickly climbed down from Guardian and ran to hide behind Mrs. Margaret. Something in the woman's tone instantly made them uneasy. "Hello, girls. I'm your Aunt Sarah, your mother's sister." Sarah tried to sound affectionate, but there was something calculating in her gaze that didn't escape Mrs. Margaret's notice. "Why didn't you ever visit us before?" Emma asked bluntly. Sarah was momentarily speechless. "Well, I lived far away, but now I'm here to take you home." "This is our home now," replied Olivia, clinging tighter to Mrs. Margaret Wilson's dress. "Isn't it, Grandma Margaret?" The woman smiled at the affectionate title the girls had spontaneously given her. "The girls can stay here as long as they want, Sarah. After all, we're family. But their place is with closer relatives. I'm their aunt. And I'm their great-aunt. I'm family, too." Mrs. Margaret's tone, though gentle, left no room for argument. Sarah realized it wouldn't be easy to take her nieces. She'd need another strategy. "Well, I see they're well cared for. I'll come back tomorrow for a longer visit." She forced another smile and held out her arms to the girls. "Don't I get a hug?" The twins, polite as they were, reluctantly stepped forward for a quick embrace. As she hugged them, Sarah stared intently at Mrs. Margaret. "We'll talk later, Aunt. There are important matters to discuss about these girls' future." After Sarah left, Mrs. Margaret grew thoughtful. She knew her niece well enough to sense there was more behind her sudden interest in nieces she barely knew. That night, after putting the girls to bed, she went to her keepsake chest and pulled out old family documents. Among them, she found what she was looking for: the will of her older sister, grandmother to Sarah and Jennifer, which mentioned the small property with the spring. According to the document, the land had been left to Jennifer, the younger granddaughter, for being the only one with genuine love for the land. "So that's it," Mrs. Margaret murmured to herself. "Sarah is after the spring, not the girls." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Meanwhile, in the smallest room of a cheap motel on the outskirts of New Hope, Michael Thompson tossed and turned in the narrow bed for the third night in a row. The sheets were already tangled at the foot of the bed, victims of his constant restlessness. The thin curtains barely blocked the streetlight flooding the room, casting shadows that seemed to silently accuse him. The dark circles under his eyes showed that sleep had abandoned him, just as he had abandoned his daughters. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Em and Liv's little faces, their teary eyes when he promised he'd be back soon, their tiny hands waving as his car drove away. Guilt ate at him like corrosive acid. On the nightstand, his phone remained silent. No news from the authorities. Next to it, a crumpled photo frame showed a picture of the twins at their last birthday, blowing out the candles on a unicorn-shaped cake together. In the background, Michael stood with a tired smile, his face already marked by financial worries, but still lit by love for his daughters. "Where are you, my darlings?" he whispered into the empty room, his voice thick with emotion and exhaustion. His desperate search for the girls had been fruitless all day. As soon as he realized his terrible mistake, Michael had reported it to the local authorities, ashamed and fearful as he admitted what he'd done. The sheriff, a middle-aged man with eyes that had seen it all, listened to his confession with an unreadable expression. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he finally asked, his voice heavy with restrained judgment. "I do. I have every second since I left them there," Michael replied, making no attempt to justify the unjustifiable. Leaving the station with copies of the twins' photos, Michael tirelessly combed the area. He handed out the pictures at every business, spoke to every driver, every farm worker, every person he met. He returned time and again to the exact spot where he had left his daughters, searching the surrounding area until exhaustion set in, calling their names until his voice gave out. That night, beyond the guilt and despair, another feeling began to creep into his heart, the paralyzing fear that something irreversible might have happened. The area was full of dense forests, rivers, and waterfalls. Two little girls alone in that wilderness. "No," he exclaimed aloud, sitting up abruptly in bed as if the movement could push away the dark thoughts. "They're fine. Have to be. He got up, walked to the small window, and gazed at the quiet night of the small rural town. Somewhere under the same starry sky, his daughters were out there, and he would find them, even if it was the last thing he ever did. In his desperation, Michael had confessed the truth to the local sheriff. He had abandoned his own daughters because he believed he could no longer care for them. The officer, though sympathetic to his remorse, made it clear that he could face serious legal consequences for his actions. Michael didn't care. His only concern was finding Emma and Olivia alive and begging for their forgiveness. Fumbling through his wallet, he found a small card he hadn't seen in years. The contact. Information for Mrs. Margaret Wilson, Clarice's great-aunt, whom he had briefly met at his wife's funeral. The next morning, after another sleepless night, Michael decided to visit the elderly woman. Maybe she knew something or could help in some way. With a photograph of his daughters in hand, he drove to Happy Haven Farm, following the directions he had gotten in town. When he arrived at the property, Michael saw a sight from a distance that made his heart stop. Two girls who looked just like his daughters, playing in the yard with a gentle ox. Afraid his eyes were deceiving him, he moved closer slowly, hiding, behind a tree to get a better look. It was them, his girls, alive, healthy, laughing in a way he hadn't seen in so long. Tears of relief and shame streamed down his face. He was about to run to them when he saw Mrs. Margaret step out of the house, calling them in for lunch. Michael froze. He didn't know how to approach. What would he say? How could he explain the unexplainable? The fear of being rejected by his own daughters paralyzed him. Just then the ox, whom the girls affectionately called Brave, lifted its head and looked straight at him. The animal let out a loud bellow, alerting the twins and Mrs. Margaret to the stranger's presence. "There's someone there, Grandma Margaret," Emma shouted, pointing at the tree where Michael was hiding. "Who's there? Show yourself," the elderly woman called with surprising firmness for her age. With no other choice, Michael stepped out from his hiding place and walked slowly toward the yard. The moment they saw him, the twins froze, their little faces a mix of joy, fear, and distrust. "Daddy?" Olivia whispered so softly it was almost inaudible. Michael fell to his knees a few feet away, unable to hold back his sobs. "Forgive me, please forgive me," was all he could manage. Mrs. Margaret, immediately understanding who the man was, stepped protectively in front of the girls. "So you're the father who abandoned them in the woods?" The hardness in her voice contrasted with her usual kindness, but Michael didn't flinch. He knew he deserved every ounce of her scorn. "Yes, ma'am. I made the worst mistake of my life. There's no excuse for what I did." Emma, always the more impulsive one, took a step forward. "Why did you leave us there, Daddy? Why did you say you'd come back soon and never did?" The question, asked with the innocence and bluntness of a 6-year-old, hit Michael like a physical blow, making him double over. "I was desperate, sweetheart. I lost everything. I couldn't take care of you anymore. I thought you'd be better off without me." He swallowed hard. "But I was wrong. So wrong. I came back to get you the same day, but you were already gone. I've been searching for you everywhere." Olivia, always more analytical, studied her father intently. "Do you still love us?" "More than anything in this world," Michael replied between sobs. "You're the only good thing I have left." Mrs. Margaret Wilson, though moved by the scene, remained firm. "What do you plan to do now, young man?" "I want my daughters back. I want a chance to make things right if you," he said, looking at the girls, "can ever forgive me." The twins exchanged glances, communicating silently as only twins can. Then, to everyone's surprise, even Brave, who was watching, they ran together and hugged their father. "We were waiting for you to come back, Daddy," said Emma. "Brave took care of us until Grandma Margaret found us," Olivia added. Michael held his daughters tightly, afraid they might disappear again if he let go. Over their heads he looked at Mrs. Wilson, whose expression had softened. "Ma'am, I know I don't deserve it, but could I stay here for a few days? Just until I find a place to start over with my girls. I can work, do anything you need." Mrs. Wilson studied the man before her. Despite his terrible mistake, she saw sincerity in his remorse, and the girls clearly still loved their father. You can stay in the back room, and there's plenty of work to be done on this farm." Michael nodded, grateful for the unexpected chance. What none of them knew was that Sarah, watching the scene from her car in the distance, saw her plans unraveling with the girl's father's return. In the days that followed, Michael worked tirelessly at Happy Haven Farm. He fixed fences, painted the house, helped with milking, tended the garden, and did every task Mrs. Wilson asked. Nights were for his daughters. He told them stories, helped, with baths, braided their hair, relearning how to be a father. The twins, with the forgiving hearts only children possess, quickly adjusted to his presence. But they refused to let go of their new grandma, Margaret, or Brave, who seemed to have adopted them as part of his personal flock. One afternoon, while Michael was repairing the stable roof, an unexpected visitor arrived. Sarah appeared at the farm with a man in a suit who introduced himself as a lawyer. "I've come for my nieces," Sarah announced bluntly, "and I have a court order granting me temporary custody." Michael scrambled down the ladder, panic written on his face. "What are you talking about? I'm their father." "A father who abandoned them in the woods," Sarah shot back, venom in her voice. "Dr. Smith here has the necessary paperwork. The girls are coming with me today." Mrs. Wilson, watching from the porch, approached with her usual calm. "It's not that simple, Sarah. Michael is here, caring for his daughters. There's no reason to take them from him now." "The law disagrees, Aunt Margaret," Sarah said triumphantly as the lawyer presented the documents. "This man admitted to abandoning his own children. That's a crime. And he's paying for it," the older woman replied. "He's rebuilding his life and earning back the girls' trust." Sarah ignored her, turning to Michael. "You have 10 minutes to pack their things. I'll be waiting in the car." Despair washed over Michael again. He was about to lose his daughters a second time. He looked at Mrs. Wilson, silently pleading for help. The elderly woman gently touched his arm. "Go get the girls from school. I'll handle this." Michael hesitated but trusted the woman who had saved his daughters and given him a second chance. He nodded and set off to pick up the twins at the small rural school a few miles away. As soon as Michael left, Mrs. Margaret invited Sarah and the lawyer inside. "Before you take the girls, there's something you need to see." In the simple but cozy living room, the elderly woman opened an old dresser and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Do you know why your sister Jennifer was given that small property with the spring, Sarah?" The lawyer suddenly looked uneasy, and Sarah paled. "That's irrelevant." "It's very relevant." Mrs. Margaret opened the envelope and took out a document. "This is your grandmother's original will. She left the property to Jennifer with one specific condition. The land could never be sold or commercially developed. It was to remain preserved because the spring feeds several creeks in the area." Sarah let out a nervous laugh. "That's ridiculous. No one leaves valuable land unused." "Your grandmother did. She loved that land, and she knew that of all her grandchildren, only Jennifer shared that love." Mrs. Margaret handed the document to the lawyer. "This invalidates any attempt to commercially exploit the spring, even if you gain custody of the twins." Dr. Smith examined the document carefully, his expression gradually shifting. "This appears legitimate, Mrs. Miller. If authentic, it does impose serious restrictions on the property's use." Sarah snatched the paper from the lawyer's hands. "This is a fraud, a desperate attempt to keep my nieces from getting what's rightfully theirs." "This isn't about their rights, Sarah. It's about your greed," Mrs. Margaret countered, an unusual sharpness in her voice. "You never cared about the girls. You didn't even attend your own sister's funeral." Sarah stood up, furious. "This isn't over, Aunt. I'll be back with a court order that can't be challenged. Go ahead," Mrs. Margaret smiled serenely, "and I'll make sure the whole truth about your intentions comes out, including that story about the forged land titles at your father's farm." Sarah froze, her face now ashen. "How did you—" "I'm nearly 80, dear. I've lived long enough to know this family's secrets." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Michael's car returning with the twins. Sarah, momentarily defeated, signaled to the lawyer and they quickly left, passing Michael and the girls without a word. "What happened?" Michael asked, confused, as the twins ran to hug Mrs. Margaret. The elderly woman smiled, tucking the envelope back into her dresser. Let's just say your sister-in-law learned that not everything in life can be bought or manipulated. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Life at Happy Haven Farm found a new balance. Michael, with the help of his accountant friend, Robert, managed to renegotiate his debts and began rebuilding his career as a financial consultant, working remotely so he wouldn't have to leave his daughters. The twins flourished under the combined care of their father and Mrs. Margaret, who had become like a real grandmother to them. They attended the local school, made friends, and without fail, set aside time every day to play with Brave, the ox who had become the symbol of their salvation. Sarah still tried a few legal maneuvers to gain custody of her nieces, but she faced resistance not only from Michael and Mrs. Margaret, but from the entire community, who had been charmed by the story of the twins and their guardian ox. The tale had spread, becoming almost a local legend. One day, while the girls were doing their homework on the porch, watched over by Brave, who grazed peacefully in the yard, Michael approached Mrs. Margaret Wilson, who was knitting in her rocking chair. "Mrs. Wilson, do you remember that property Jennifer inherited, the one with the spring?" The woman nodded without interrupting her knitting. "I've been thinking, what if we turned that place into a kind of natural park? We could preserve the spring as the will requires, and at the same time create a space where people could learn about the importance of environmental conservation." Mrs. Wilson smiled, pleased to see that Michael had truly changed. "I think Jennifer would love that idea, and the girls would have a legacy to manage when they grow up." "Exactly," Michael said excitedly. "We could start small, build eco-friendly trails, a little visitor center, maybe even an area for rescued animals inspired by Brave." The mention of the ox's name made the animal lift its head, as if understanding they were talking about him. The twins laughed at the coincidence. "He always knows when we're talking about him," Emma remarked. "It's because he's magical," Olivia said with conviction. Michael smiled at his daughters, amazed by their innocence and wisdom. In a way, Olivia was right. Brave was magical, not because of supernatural powers, but because of the impact he'd had on their lives. If it weren't for that ox, his daughters might have... He couldn't even finish the thought. Mrs. Wilson, always perceptive, touched Michael's arm. "Don't torture yourself with the past, my son. What matters is what we do with the present." Michael nodded, grateful for the wisdom of the woman, who in such a short time had become a motherly figure he'd never had in his own life. "You know, Mrs. Wilson, I've never understood how Brave found my girls in the forest. Of all the places he could have been, why was he right there?" The woman smiled enigmatically. "Some things don't need an explanation, Michael. Maybe Brave was guided by something greater than us, or maybe simply he sensed the fear of two little lost girls, and his kind heart led him to them." "As they say, God works in mysterious ways," Michael commented, watching his daughters, who had now abandoned their homework and were running to feed Brave fresh carrots from the garden. "Exactly. Your mistakes brought you here. They brought you back to your daughters, but they also brought all of us together into this new family we've formed." Michael felt his eyes well up. "I can never thank you enough for what you've done for us. No need to thank me. Just live each day honoring the second chance you've been given." That evening, as they prepared a barbecue to celebrate Mrs. Wilson's 74th birthday, the local community gathered at Happy Haven Farm. Friends, neighbors, the girls' school teachers, everyone wanted to celebrate not just the beloved woman's birthday, but also the incredible story of redemption, forgiveness, and love that had touched so many hearts. Brave, the unlikely hero of the story, grazed peacefully in a special pen decorated with colorful ribbons by the twins. The neighborhood children lined up to feed him apples and carrots, while the adults told and retold the story of the ox who saved the abandoned twins. In a corner of the yard, Richard Miller, the girls' grandfather and Sarah's father, watched the scene with a somber expression. He hesitantly approached Michael, who was preparing the meat for the barbecue. "Can we talk for a minute?" the farmer asked, visibly uncomfortable. Michael nodded, handing the utensils to a neighbor who offered to take over. The two men walked to a bench under a large mango tree, away from curious ears. "I came to apologize," Richard began with difficulty. I never gave you a chance, Michael. I always thought I wasn't good enough for my Jennifer. Michael was surprised by his former father-in-law's honesty. You weren't entirely wrong. I failed Jennifer. I failed my daughters. But you came back for them. That counts for something. Richard took a deep breath. Sarah also came to ask for my forgiveness yesterday. She told me everything about the plans for the spring, about the legal maneuvers to take the girls from you. She did that? Michael couldn't hide his surprise. Yes, and she asked for my help to make amends. She wants to be part of this natural park project, said she has contacts at the environmental department who can help secure official support. Michael was momentarily speechless. Sarah, who had been his biggest adversary in recent months, now wanted to collaborate. Why the sudden change? I think Mrs. Margaret's determination made her rethink a lot of things. And Richard hesitated. She also found out she's pregnant. Said she doesn't want her child growing up seeing her as the wicked aunt from children's stories. Michael smiled, understanding. The prospect of motherhood had touched Sarah's heart in a way nothing else had. Tell her she's welcome to collaborate on the park project. Richard nodded, visibly relieved. He extended his hand to his son-in-law. Welcome back to the family, Michael. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The handshake sealed a reconciliation that had seemed impossible just a few months earlier. As the two men returned to the celebration, they watched Emma and Olivia running across the yard, closely followed by Brave, who still seemed like a vigilant guardian despite his advanced age. They looked just like their mother, Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. But they've got their grandfather's stubborn streak, Michael teased, drawing a genuine laugh from his former father-in-law. That night of celebration marked the true beginning of a new chapter, not just for Michael and his daughters, but for an entire community that had come together around a story of redemption and an extraordinary bull who had done something incredible. In the years that followed, the Spring Source Natural Park became a reality, an oasis of environmental preservation that drew visitors from across the region. The twins, now teenagers, actively participated in managing the park, guiding school groups, explaining the importance of conservation, and inevitably telling the story of how a bull named Brave had changed the fate of an entire family. Brave, now elderly, had a special place in the park, a spacious private pasture near the entrance, where he received daily visits from admirers who came to meet the hero bull. Despite his age, he retained his majestic bearing and gentle gaze, especially when the twins were nearby. Michael found his calling in financial education, giving talks to young people about the importance of a healthy relationship with money, using his own story as an example of how financial decisions can impact an entire life. Years later, he remarried a teacher from the girls' school who embraced the twins as if they were her own. Mrs. Margaret, though time had taken its toll, remained steadfast on her farm, now modernized and expanded thanks to the joint efforts of Michael, Sarah and Richard. The family, once fractured by bitterness and resentment, had finally reunited, stronger and wiser. Sarah gave birth to a boy, who grew up seeing his twin cousins as his heroes and Brave as his first love in the animal world. The spring that Eve had once been a source of greed became a symbol of unity and shared purpose. On a sunny afternoon when the twins turned 16, the whole family gathered at the park for a special celebration. At the center of attention, besides the birthday girls, was Brave, now with a commemorative plaque dedicated to him. To the most unlikely and most faithful guardian, who taught us that true greatness lies in acts of protection and love. The twins, moved, hugged the old ox's neck, and he responded with a soft moo, as if understanding the importance of that moment. You know what I love most about this whole story, Emma said to her sister as they stroked Brave's still glossy coat. What? That it all started with abandonment, but ended up giving us more family than we ever had before. Olivia nodded, looking at the gathered group. Their father, stepmother, grandparents, aunt, little cousin, Mrs. Margaret Wilson, neighbors, friends, all, United by a story starring an unlikely bovine hero. It's like Grandma Margaret always says, sometimes we need to get lost to find the right path. Robert, who had been listening to the conversation, walked over to his daughters. And sometimes we need a stubborn ox to show us the way, he added, stroking Brave's snout with endless gratitude. The animal seemed to smile in his own way, satisfied with having fulfilled his mission. Not just saving two lost children in the forest, but uniting hearts that fate had separated. As the sun set on the horizon, casting golden hues over the serene landscape of the park, Brave watched the gathered family with the calm of one who knows that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. And sometimes, that hope comes, in the most unexpected form, like a gentle ox who follows his heart and finds two little girls lost in the vastness of a forest. The end of the story. Dear listeners, what did you think of this touching journey? Was Emma and Olivia's forgiveness of their father the right decision? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.